All right. Welcome, everyone, to this first ever LinkedIn Live attempt from the team here at MZ Burning Glass. I'm coming to you live from our Moscow, Idaho office with two special guests who are not here in the Moscow, Idaho office. I have Ron Hetrick, who's a senior labor economist, and also Rucha Van Kudre, who is a research manager here. And we're just going to dive right in and get some of their expert insight into the jobs report and the overall labor market situation, looking back at the year that just ended and looking ahead at the year to come. So Ron and Rucha, thank you for joining. I'll just throw out an initial question, and whoever wants to jump on it can, and we'll just get the chat going. So now that we have all of the data from 2021, just want to start things off by asking, what are some of the major trends that we saw throughout the year in the labor market? So looking back at the year that just wrapped up, what stands out to you?
So yeah, I guess I can start. I think the first thing that really jumped out at everyone, starting towards the middle of the year and then continuing through, was the large number of job openings we've had. That came down a bit towards the end of the year, although we do think that perhaps, some of the jobs numbers there are maybe not quite right. But I think we're really interested sort of in seeing how those numbers continue this year. And along with the focus really on the quits rate is higher than it's ever been. And so I think, there's been a lot of work looking into why that might be and seeing how things go as the year continues.
Yeah, I think building on that, we heard from employers, especially in manufacturing in 2020, that they were having problems finding workers. And that's with job openings at that time being relatively stable. But if you go into 2021, it's like an explosion. And you have industries like manufacturing up almost 100% or more than 100%. Eating and drinking places up about 100% in job openings. So absolutely explosive growth for lower skilled workers. We were used to a feeding frenzy for STEM level jobs, but we've never seen anything like this when it comes to lower skilled workers.
Right. And did any of those trends in particular, were any of them sort of surprising or especially shocking to you? Were there ones that were kind of more to be expected?
I think I think there's a level of this where once you saw the momentum building, especially when we didn't see labor force participation increasing at all, like it's been flat for 18 months, it started to recover and then got stuck in 2021. So with that lack of recovery from people out of the labor force, it really wasn't a surprise that, openings started to build on top of openings.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. And sort of pivoting to more recent news, just thinking about the jobs reports that came out in January. Talk to me about those numbers. What was surprising? Was anything disappointing, encouraging with the most recent release?
I think everyone was pretty shocked because we were expecting those December numbers to have been pushed up, and they really were not at all. And so I think everyone was surprised by that. But given what we're seeing, there's, two different sources of data that come out, and we're seeing very differing numbers between them. So I think at this point, it's hard to say what the true number of jobs really created in December were, and we really just don't know at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that when I'm in talking to employers, feels like every day, all I'm hearing is just incredible grief, heartburn, and ache. So when I take it from an anecdotal side, the people, especially trying to hire a lot of lower end workers, you see that they very much do not feel like they are seeing improvement in their labor markets. So in that side, it does make sense that these numbers aren't that great. But just in general, it just seems to be this far into things to not be seeing the level of growth, to Rucha's point about, in the household survey, we're seeing, we saw like 1 million gain in employed. We're not quite sure where those people are going. People ask, are self-employed people counted in employed? And the answer is yes, but even that number wasn't up remarkably. So it's just hard to figure out. These people say they're going to work. We're just not quite sure where they're working.
Right. And one of the nice things has been that unemployment has been dropping for the most part. So, as far as we can tell, these people should be working somewhere.
Right. Good. And are there, I guess, how are you seeing, Ron, you spoke to the sort of the evidence that you're seeing from folks that you know and things that you've observed. How are employers starting to respond? Are they changing tactics? And what are some of those changes that are starting to take place, Ron or Rucha, that want to speak to that?
Rucha, go ahead on that.
So yeah, I mean, this is something we've actually been seeing for the past year, and not just in the US, really in other geographies as well, is employers are starting to change some of their tactics when they're looking for who to hire. So for example, we've seen, big changes in people being much more willing to offering training to their workers. We've seen, more mention of things like starting bonuses. There's a lot more openness to flexibility and remote work. And these are trends that we really think are just going to continue.
Yeah, one thing I could tell you is just talking to employers over and over again, they are in dire straits. They have a lot of these places, think about state institutions or anybody who has to go through some kind of approval process to get increased wages. They simply do not have the flexibility to keep trying to increase wages. And I also think that say increase of wages is just so incredibly destructive. And so I think a lot of employers are just like, look, we can't go anymore. We just can't go any higher. And, that's the primary concern, because everybody wants to know, what else can I do? Mm-hmm. And I think, the things that Rucha just pointed to, they're having their choice. They're going to have to start offering something else other than just, another $1 or $10 or so in your paycheck every hour.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything, I mean, it's obviously a very challenging environment then for employers. Is sometimes the other way people will talk about it is, it's a good market to be a worker, to be an employee. Is that kind of the bright side to this? Is this good for employees, or is that kind of a narrative that needs to be nuanced as well?
Real wages are going down. So everything that we're seeing in pay increases, look, we need the pay increases, obviously, because of inflation. But when we factor in inflation, real wages are actually heading down right now. And I think that's the thing that we're very concerned about is, looking at a lot of commodities prices over the past year, they're up so astronomically high. And I think that that's something that's just, we're kind of stuck in an endless loop. To get people in, you do have to pay more. But all of these pay increases are going into product price increases. And I think it's all kind of coming back around to kind of eat up all of those pay gains. So, what are you going to do? You got to increase the pay. But on the same hand, it just keeps kind of perpetuating this inflationary situation that we're in.
And I mean, I would say that I do think there's some nuance in the sense that this is beneficial for some employees, as is always true, right? So I do think that there are certainly in certain sectors that are growing a lot, there are employees who are doing well. I just don't know that it's true for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Thank you. And time is flying by, but in our remaining few minutes, I do want to ask a couple more specific questions looking at particular industries. Supply chain and logistics. How is that sector doing? Are we seeing a recovery? Obviously, it got slammed in 2021. Talk to us about the trends that you're seeing there.
Go ahead, Ron.
I think my biggest concern right now is we're seeing such a problem in generating products. So if we look at manufacturing new orders right now, they're in the stratosphere, record levels, nothing we've ever seen before. But if we look at industrial production, it's not only not even flat, it's actually down a little bit in recent months. So you see this incredible demand, but we just don't have the ability to kind of feed that demand. And some of that is I think you have to look at that and say that's kind of an indication that the supply chain side of things may not be fully working. And it makes sense, right? I mean, if labor is a key component to producing goods and we have these record numbers, we talked about in the very first question, we have astounding almost 1 million job openings in manufacturing when their standard was around 300,000. So we know that a lot of products that need to be made just simply aren't being made, and you can only push productivity so far. So I think that there's, we're seeing less of the bottleneck. You're not seeing as many stories about, ships stuck at sea, but I think the reality is this is a supply chain, and, goods come from one industry as inputs into others. And we know that a lot of those inputs, when we look at their costs going up, we know that they're probably not being made to the degree that the demand is certainly there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rucha, anything to add?
No, I mean, I think Ron's exactly right. This is an issue that we've seen for a while, and it's, I think, probably going to continue. And I think everyone's hoping that things are going to clear up, but it's not clear why or how.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, speaking of trends that looks set to continue. Remote work, is that going to continue to be a staple in 2022? Is that going to start to roll back and folks go more hybrid? Do you have any sense of the remote work trend?
I mean, nothing we've seen in the postings right now really indicates that the trend is dying down. I think part of it is that, as we were saying, in many jobs right now, they're so competitive that people have to be willing to offer more remote work. And as long as that continues to be true and these employers are still trying to compete, then I think it's probably going to be likely that we'll see that going on for a while.
Yeah. And I just to add to that, one of the biggest factors, so if we're missing basically 5 million people have dropped out of the labor force that were in the labor force prior. And when we look at a lot of what's holding people back, one of those big issues is still childcare. Childcare places are like everybody else. They can't find workers either because they're trying to find the same workers that everybody else is trying to find. So when you look at what's kind of a bottleneck there, it's going to be that. So I think you're always going to have these people who are only going to be able to re-engage in that capacity. I've been encouraging employers who are kind of sticking in the ground on that to say, look, put 2 postings out there, offer one that's remote, offer one that's not, and then see what kind of delta you get. Like, see how many people, are only willing to do the remote side, and then follow up with them. I mean, there's certain questions you're like legally not allowed to ask, but I think there's ways that you could probably learn a lot about, are people just in a situation they simply can't get out of, or is this something that's more transitory?
Right. Yeah, that's great. That kind of just try it and iterate and learn approach could make a lot of sense. We actually have a question from a viewer asking if part of the issue or how much of the issue is that there's these open tech jobs that folks just don't have the skills for. So kind of back to the subject of a skills gap. How much of it do you think how much is that playing a factor, particularly when it comes to filling tech jobs?
I mean, I think it's true that there are skills gaps, right? But it's not like primarily tech jobs right now, I would say, right? There are many industries right now that have a lot of openings. So like, I think the skill gaps are really existing everywhere. And this is not just a tech problem at all. I think if you look at the numbers, it's like, I want to say in November, the one that had the most like highest percentage change in openings was actually finance and insurance as opposed to anything else. So, and, we've definitely seen like high quit rates and things like accommodations and food services. So I think this is larger than just a tech problem.
Yeah. I would say when you look at there's 2 numbers you can kind of look at. You can actually look at unemployment rates by occupational bucket. BLS puts those out every single month. And when you look at the unemployment rates for lower skilled workers, they're approaching, all-time historical lows. And you could say, well, that's kind of true across the board, but these other industries are used to that. I mean, engineering at one point, in IT back in the, year 2000, I mean, they were used to having absolutely no one out there. And somehow, these industries get through. And I think, those jobs are probably not being filled at the same frequency. But as I always tell people, you don't notice when, a web developer doesn't get hired for a company and they don't get their latest mobile app out on time, unless, that's something that's a really big deal. But you definitely notice and feel, if your garbage doesn't get picked up, or if the restaurant you want to go to doesn't have the seating capacity because they don't have anybody working there. So I think that we've gotten kind of used to, I don't want to call it numb. I think we're just used to not filling tech jobs. We're used to these skills gaps. Yes, they're getting probably a little bit worse. We know, certain things with immigration are down, and other things, other programs that might be able to help these things are down. But I really think right now the acute pain that we're feeling is really in that lower skill. So you could say we have a skills gap, but in reverse.
Yeah, good. Great insight there. Thank you both. We are right up against time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for joining us, everybody, all the viewers who chimed in as well, and thank you for submitting the question. We will probably be continuing to use this format and experiment along with our monthly as the JOLTS report comes out. So continue to join us, continue to join the conversation, and we'll catch you next time. Signing off from MZ Burning Glass.